We discuss all the questions in the task, and the first thing we must do is identify the questions, and we do that with our marker. Make sure you underline the two questions, and just to review, how true is the statement that tourism has many negative effects on the countries that people travel to? How true is that statement, your opinion? And then some examples. What can tourists do to reduce the harmful effects of tourism on local cultures and environments? So let's start off with, we're going to write an outline to answer the questions asked in this task 2 example. So paragraph 1, we need to state your opinion. Make sure that if they ask you if you agree or disagree, make sure that you tell us which one you do. We want to know exactly what your opinion is. And then we go to paragraph 2, and we want to start with thinking of some examples of the negative effects that countries get when people travel there. So I think one of the big examples I've seen is pollution, and it's in my personal experience, and it's something that I can talk about from articles that I've read too. It's often in the news. So the problem is pollution, and one of the examples of pollution is the big problem of plastic bottles. So I would use as examples in my outline the beaches of Thailand, and even in Antarctica. I just saw a story from a traveler, a scientific traveler in the Antarctic region, one of the scientists exploring, and she said that she went out on a hike, an organized hike around the South Pole, and found a lot of garbage, a lot of plastic bottles, a lot of garbage. So those would be my 2 examples of the negative impacts. Then I think too, the other thing that I might talk about, air pollution. And when people travel, we usually are renting cars. We're taking a lot of plane trips, and that adds to the pollution problem too. So we want to outline what the pollution is in paragraph 3. I'm sorry, in paragraph 2. And then in paragraph 3, what can tourists do? We want to answer questions 2 now. So if we see that some of the problems are in the oceans and at the Arctic, we could talk about we want to dispose of, throw out, good vocabulary word, dispose of. We want to throw the plastic bottles and the plastic containers out in the proper garbage. We just don't want to throw those on the floor. I think we could encourage people to travel in ways that are less harmful for pollution. So I'm just going to write travel green options. Maybe use electric cars. Maybe don't take a plane to your travel destination. Maybe take the train. Or maybe even think about traveling locally instead of traveling so far. And then the third one I think I might put in there is one of the negative impacts. And I think we talked about this on Monday. Changing culture. So when we have a lot of tourists arrive to a place, it's not as real, it's not as authentic as it once was. And I think the example in our book on Monday was locals doing special rituals that they would only do once a year, and them now doing that whenever people were willing to pay them. So changing culture. So I think another thing that we could do if we want to, what can tourists do to reduce the harmful effects of tourism? Disposing of plastic, traveling green, and educating people, I think. I think a lot of people don't even think about the problems and negative impacts. So the more that we can educate people, the better we can do of reducing the negative impacts. I think I would finish this I think I would finish this task in 4 paragraphs. I think when we write about that we agree that there are some negative impacts, we also want to talk about the positive impacts of tourism on the local countries. And one of the things that we talked about Monday and that people often talk about is the economic benefits. Economic having to do with the economy, business, the chance for people to make money, and benefits, the good things that come from that. So I think that we cannot ignore the good parts about tourism, even though that we are agreeing with that there's many negative effects. I think you have to agree with that. But we also want to make sure that we talk about the good parts, the positive impacts of tourism as well. So in the conclusion, I think that we want to say that even though there are positives, increased economic opportunity, more jobs for people, there are positives. We want to go back and review that the negative parts are something that we need to be aware of and really focus on as well. All right, so I just want to go through some linking words and talk about the proper use of each of these. And also I was going to try to add to, and hopefully you're hearing this and you can add to your notes at the bottom of your handout. In the first box, linking words and phrases. Some of the more common ones, and when we have a list and it's at the end, I need to bring my books, my pens, and my notebook to school tomorrow. And if we want to add another thought, I need to prepare for my exams, and I also want to try that new restaurant next Saturday night too. When we link words and phrases together with but, it usually means that the second part of the phrase, we're disagreeing with the first part. So, Mr. Jim, he sure is a nice guy, but sometimes he's cranky at school. Yeah, so we say something nice about old Mr. Jim. He is a very nice man and very happy, but sometimes he's cranky. Yeah, so but we use as a word when there's going to be something that we disagree with after the beginning. Also is another word that we can use in place of and. And one of the things that we're going to be talking to you about and working on the rest of the year is some variety in your writing. We want to vary some of your vocabulary and not be repeating ourselves with the same words all the time. One of my favorites I like, as well as when you're giving a list or maybe when we're adding another feature. So the positive impacts of tourism, there's economic benefits as well as a better understanding of people across cultures. So as well as, another way of saying and. While, when we're talking about two things that are happening at the same time. While I was doing my homework last night, the telephone rang and my friend was on the phone. While I was going to school this morning, I saw an accident. When two things were happening at the same time. Often we use while when one thing interrupts another. I was studying, present continuous tense, while I was studying, and then something happened. The phone rang. While I was going to school, present continuous, I saw, past simple, I saw an accident. Whereas, it's a way that we link ideas across two or different categories. The weather in South Vietnam is very warm and sunny, whereas the weather in Hanoi is usually a little bit cooler and more cloudy. Yeah, whereas when we're comparing across two groups or two things, although, we use although when we're going to, similar to but, we use although to talk about exceptions often. That restaurant is open all the time, although I don't think they're open Sunday afternoons. Yeah, when we're listing an exception, although. However, from the reading that I've done of your work already, I think you're using however well as a linking word, and also that's similar to but when we're giving a different opinion. Studying for your exam is very important. However, that does not ensure that you'll get a high grade. Yeah. Studying for your exam is very important. However, that may not mean that you'll get a high grade. And then I like this one too. On the other hand. Again, we're looking for sentence variety. And as we give you some of your writing assignments, make sure that you're using some of the vocabulary that we'll be giving you and that we've already gone over in class. On the other hand, again, when we're contrasting, when we're giving a different idea. Mr. Jim is usually very upbeat and enthusiastic. On the other hand, when he teaches right after lunch, he looks a little tired. He looks a little tired. And then conclusions. The conclusions are very important in your Task 2 writing assignment. And we gave you some language there. And we've been practicing this in the Task 1 assignments as well. And in summary is a good way to start your conclusion. Overall, especially for the Task 1 writing, we're doing Task 2. Overall is a good way to begin your conclusion. In conclusion is a good statement for your conclusion. Nothing wrong with just stating in conclusion. Generally. So make sure that you're using these words correctly. Sometimes I read your work and you're using some different words, which is good. We don't want to be using the same language all the time. However, that we're not always using those words in the correct manner. And then we want to talk about, let's see if we can get a few more of the linking words on the board. This is important. Again, we want to be thinking about sentence variety and giving the reader something different to keep his interest. So I just want to get the board clear. So why don't you add some of these? Add some of these to your list. And furthermore, that's a really good word. It's a good word in business. It's also a good word for academia, for academic writing. And it's just a big fancy word for saying in addition to. In addition to. And that happens to be the next one. In addition, or especially I like additionally. I know some of my students are out there. I can think of a few people who are ready to use this word, but instead of always saying and also, to start off a new thought or to give another example in a series, this is a really good word to have. Additionally, it's a good linking word, and it's one that will help you improve your score on the Task 2 assignment. In spite of. Yeah, in spite of is another good linking phrase, and we use that when the conclusion isn't obvious. It goes against, our evidence goes against what we would expect. So an example of in spite of. Miss Julie is a very thin person in spite of eating lots of Big Macs and Jollibee every day. In spite of being a very big eater and not doing any exercise, Julie is very thin. I like, instead of for example, which is effective, for instance. So make sure you're including these. Take your pens out and put these down on the list with some of the linking words in conclusion. But I like this a lot too. Instead of always saying, for example, using the phrase, for instance, is very helpful. To emphasize a point. In fact. So you might say something, you might make a claim that the economic benefits of tourism don't outweigh the negative impacts. In fact, often tourism is ruining the very tourist sites, the destinations that people come for. So another one of the examples that you might use in the negative impacts and pollution for international travelers, a lot of the beach destinations, like in Thailand, and I think a little bit in Vietnam too, but especially in Thailand, the coral reefs are being killed or being destroyed. The Great Reef around Australia has been so damaged that a lot of the life there is now gone, and people aren't coming there anymore. The reason that people went there, the tourists ruined it, and now the people don't come anymore. In fact, is a good way to emphasize one of our points. I want to go back now, and they don't all have their book. I want to go back and look at the topics, the things that we want to emphasize when we're writing the bullet points when we're writing our task 2 response. And we didn't cover all of these. I want to go back and do these. In task 1, we always teach you no opinions, no examples. You're just communicating the information in the visual displays, the graphs and the charts, and you're communicating that information. You're not giving your opinion, and you're not giving any examples. But here, it's really important to give some relevant examples from your own experience. And relevant means it's important, it's about the topic. But if you have some experience with tourism causing a lot of pollution, that's something that you would want to write about. And even if you don't have some kind of personal experience, you can say that. Even though I don't have any personal experience with this issue, some people say, or I've heard that, or I've seen on the news. Give your idea, but also include the fact that you don't have that personal experience. Outline your answer using paragraphs. We've already done that. We've been practicing that. So your preparation for your writing task is to write an outline in paragraph form. One of the things that is a bit of a challenge when you're first starting off is using all those linking words that we were just talking about. It's not always so easy to translate those from English to Vietnamese. And the other thing, one of the points we've talked about before too, is one of the things we want to talk about too is you don't want to always just copy the words from the questions in task 2. You want to paraphrase. So if you're given a task to talk about people who are driving to work every day, maybe let's call them commuters. As best we can, we want to try to paraphrase. So we do have a question. I'm excited that the interactive portion of our live streaming is a go. And the question is furthermore similar to moreover? Is furthermore similar to moreover? I'd say it's exactly the same as moreover. Furthermore, we're going to add more information. Further and more. Yeah, furthermore and moreover. That's an exact therefore. Moreover and furthermore. Very good. Grammar. We're going to be introducing some basic grammar lessons on Monday. We were working on relative clauses and relative pronouns. But everybody's writing levels are a little bit different. Some of you, we want to go back and really work on the basics of sentence construction. Some of us still need to work on that. So here's another question. If there is on the other hand, then is there on the one hand? That's usually the way the expression goes. It goes together. On the one hand, tourism has some really positive effects. Economic growth, economic opportunities, cultural exchange. But on the other hand, there's a lot of damage done. You don't always have to use those together, but I like that. Yeah, on the one hand and on the other hand. That's a really good way to contrast. So let's go back to our original question, and that is, some people say that tourism has many negative effects on the countries that people travel to. And how true is that statement? I think I want to do this today with, instead of pros and cons, let's use our column headers. On the one hand, and that'll be the benefits. And then on the other hand, and that's the costs. The bad and the good. So if anybody has some ideas, if you're able to send us those ideas, I'd like to get your ideas on the board too. I don't want to be just talking about my ideas all the time. So what are the positive positive aspects of tourism on a local destination, and what are the negative? So I think we can all agree probably the biggest positive, economic activity. And that just means business. That can be anything. Restaurants, tour guides, hotels and restaurants. That's a big part of the GDP of Vietnam. Hotels and restaurants are a big part of the tourism industry. Any ideas? For the ideas for the negative impacts, positive impacts? I think we talked about, like I said, cultural exchange, but how about cultural education? When we travel, we often get to learn about people, we understand people better, and it makes us a little bit closer. Cultural education, especially in a global economy, the global world now, it's important to reach out and understand people from other places, different cultures. That's a real positive. But then we go back to the negatives, the different kinds of pollution, plastic, air, water, probably impacts on wildlife. That's a problem that a lot of tourists will often cause. They impact the environment to the point where it impacts the wildlife. And then some examples. Some examples are really important in writing task 2. Yeah, so we just had somebody said job opportunities on the benefits. Absolutely. Jobs. And I think that goes into economic activity, but that's a really good example. Keep them coming. Some other ideas. I don't want to just keep saying my ideas. Negative impacts. Can you think of any negative impacts? So pollution is the biggest thing. A lot of plastic ends up in the water and in the environment. That does a lot of damage to the wildlife. A lot of air pollution. And the other thing is, tourists often, and I would say it's one of the things that bothers me the most when I go to a tourist destination. When I stay in the tourist region, I was in Da Nang, and there were many tourists from Korea, and they sing karaoke. And they sing karaoke until about 5 o'clock in the morning, 5 a.m., and they're outside playing loud music and singing karaoke. So noise pollution for me, that's a really big problem too. Another cost, so deforestation, I like that. Usually we think of deforestation with when they cut down trees for the wood to make furniture or even to make paper, deforestation for industry. But then there's usually a cost, and the cost in money to repair things, to pick up the garbage. So I think that's another problem where the tourists come and they spend a lot of money and they put that into the economy, but then they leave a lot of costs behind too, like who's going to pick up all that plastic. And then talking about different ways of making that problem less. What could we do? I think education I would like to work on here a lot. In paragraph 3, I would talk about educating people about doing the right things. But I would put this all under the umbrella of education. Teach people that it's important to throw their plastic bottles away. Educate people so that they're more likely to get electric cars instead of cars that use gasoline. Very good. And then let's start to link some of these ideas. So to make complex sentences, this is where we want to link the ideas. So let's see if, I'm going to throw this out there. I'm going to give an example. But I want you to try to use some of the linking words that we reviewed and link one of the benefits to one of the costs. Let's try to link that idea and write a complex sentence. I want everyone to try to write one complex sentence where we talk about one of the negative impacts of the tourism. One of the negative impacts to the positive. So let me try this. Although there are economic benefits, from tourism. So we start with the linking word although. Although there are economic benefits from tourism, the impact on the environment outweighs them. So there's one example. Although there are economic benefits from tourism, the impact on the environment outweighs them. The bad parts about tourism are worse than the good parts of tourism for us. Did we get any ideas from our listeners? Any sentences? Can anyone come up with a sentence to take an idea and link it, one of the positive aspects to one of the negative aspects? Who can come up with a sentence? Increased job opportunities, cultural education. Everyone give it a try. Maybe start with job opportunities. Tourism brings a lot of job opportunities to the places they visit. Maybe but. However is a good way to link a positive to a negative. On the other hand, On the other hand, and this would be a good one, on one hand, tourism brings a lot of job opportunities to a location. But on the other hand, there's a big impact on wildlife and the quality and health of the beaches. Yeah, on the one hand, on the other hand, getting some ideas from one to the other. It looks like we have an idea. It looks like we have a sentence. Let's see what we have here. Thank you very much. Mr. Lee, can you tell me who wrote that? Mr. Munn? Mr. Munn, well done. I was counting on you. I like your sentence too. Tourism brings job opportunities. Lots of them. Okay, that's a good start. Even though. Yeah, so how about another one? Real good introduction. Actually, that could go in the conclusion too. Your conclusion and your introduction are going to be similar. In the introduction, you're going to tell us your ideas and what you're going to write about. Then you're going to write about it. You're going to give us your examples, your opinions, and then in the conclusion, you're going to review that. Yeah, so your introduction and your conclusion are going to be similar, and I like this for either. Besides the positive effects, there are also disadvantages. Really good linking word there. And another one. Well done. I recognize this from Miss Foom. Miss Foom, I recognize your writing. For instance, exhaustic fumes from vehicles can cause air pollution. So that's a good example. I like that. For instance, and I think we would change that a little bit for the grammar, but we won't worry about that today. I think Miss Foom, if I'm not mistaken, that was yours. For instance, vehicles cause a lot of exhaust fumes, which harm the air. Yeah, a lot of pollution from there. So let's see if we can come up with some conclusions too. Finish up your comparatives. So on the one hand and on the other hand, even though, although, those are all good words to link the ideas that there's some good in this and some bad. We call that balance. We want to put some balance in there. How much more time do we have? How much more time are we doing? 5 minutes? Great. Let's do a conclusion. Let's come up with a conclusion. So I said this before. When you're writing your outline, I think it's a really good idea to have your conclusion before you start. So decide if you agree or disagree. You're going to think of some examples, some things from your own experience. But then the conclusion, if you have your conclusion before you start, you'll have a target. You'll know where you're going. You'll know what belongs in your answer and what doesn't belong in your answer. You'll know what's relevant to your response. So let's see. And this should have been your homework. So some of you should already have this. I want you to send me some of your conclusions and really your first sentence. Give me your one sentence of your conclusion. In conclusion, overall. I like those two for this one. I'm going to start with, in conclusion, myself. This should be your homework now. Some of you, let's get your conclusions for negative impact, positive impact for tourism on a place. In conclusion, even though there are many economic advantages from tourism, okay, I like this a lot because it puts together a lot of what we've already used. So think of when you're answering these type 2 questions. They usually don't give you a question where there's just one right answer. As a matter of fact, there's never any just one right answer. What we want to do is hear what your opinion is, see what evidence you have to support your opinion, and then also the quality of your writing. So think about the balance. Which do you prefer? Do you prefer eating at a restaurant or do you prefer eating at home? Well, you know, there's times when I like to eat at a restaurant, you know, special occasions, anniversary. But most of the time, I like to eat at home. But we want to answer that question using that balance. It's usually not just all one way or the other. So let's see a couple of our examples here. And we've talked about this before too. There's many different ways, there's many different styles, but let's work on keeping our sentences short enough. We want to do some complex sentences too, but we want to work on our grammar. So my conclusion, in conclusion, even though there are many economic advantages from tourism, I believe, is it right or wrong? I don't know. It's my opinion. I believe, could have written in my opinion. I believe that the costs outweigh the benefits. That's a clear answer. That's a clear answer to the first part of the question. And I think that makes a good conclusion. Let's quickly go through these. To sum up, tourism has harm. Let's rephrase that. To sum up, tourism does harm to the environment and local culture. But besides that, it has many benefits for everyone. Pretty good. Although tourism has improved the economy, there are some negative effects that should not be ignored. Oh, those are two pretty good ones. Do we have any more? All right. So, to wrap it up again, really important that we outline and that we are clear on what our answer is. So don't go to the middle so much that you don't give us a good answer. I want to emphasize a couple of the tips that we talked about today and that are on your sheet. Make sure that you give yourself enough time when you finish to reread everything. One thorough reading at the end, and you will find some spelling mistakes, and you'll find some easy mistakes. So as you're timing your writing, make sure you give yourself enough time to do that. Go back and check your spelling. When you're writing this, when you're thinking, it's easy to make mistakes. Go back and check your spelling. And these linking words that we've been practicing, these are really important. We're going to be working on that. And that's a big part of your score here, too. Using the linking words in the appropriate places. A conclusion. Often people write really good responses, but they don't have a formal conclusion, and you want to make sure you have that. And really, this one's a little bit longer, probably need a little bit more than one sentence. But a lot of times your introduction should be 1 or 2 sentences, and your conclusion should be 1 or 2 sentences as well. Include relevant examples from your own experience. I always like to talk to one of my students and ask her the question, if you don't have relevant experience, you can say that, or you can imagine Yeah, talk about something as if you've done it. So if you say that you've been to a museum that you haven't really been to, that's okay. But when you're doing the writing task 2, it's okay to be creative, to be imaginative. And if you do say that you don't have any relative experience, then go off and say, but I've heard or I've read about, but give an example. Task 1 writing, no opinions, no examples. Task 2 writings, your opinion, examples, and reasons. That's what they're going to be looking for. And then again, so the way that we want to structure this is after your introduction, you want to present your main ideas, and then you support your main ideas with examples and reasons. So I think on an assignment like this, I'd probably look for maybe 2 or 3 of the best reasons that there's negative impacts and focus on them. The length of this assignment is 250 words. If you write a little bit less, I wouldn't worry about that. They will take some points off because of that. But 250 words, and with 250 words, that's not a lot. That's not a lot to have a lot of examples. So I think if you can have 2 or 3 examples to complete this task, that should be sufficient. Again, make sure that you're outlining, and your outline is written, the structure for your response, and then have a conclusion. Your introduction will state the answer, but have a conclusion so you have a goal. You know that where you're going. Your writing is like a path. You're taking the reader down a path, and you want it to all make sense. You don't want to be talking about things that are irrelevant. All right. Thanks for coming today. I hope to work this out to where we can make this more interactive. Happy New Year. Make sure that you're safe this holiday, and I'll be real happy to see you all when we return. Chúc mừng năm mới.